It's very similar. Vamana is a craft. The Vamanas in the Mahabharata are supposed to be the vehicles of the people who were there during the Great War. And the vahanas, so Vamana, Vahana, the vahanas are the vehicle. So backing up to the deities, these are energies, and if you were to do a deep concentration, say, on the Ganesha mantra, eventually you could get yourself into a place where you see this being who looks very much like an elephant. The big ears, the trunk, the whole deal. But it's not a god. It's a sound archetype, and it appears this way because of its abilities. Because its abilities to have great strength, to perform great change in your life. And the word Ganesh is this capability that's encoded in sound. So Ganesh is this powerful energy. The root bija seed syllable is gum and guna in the mantra. And when we look at where this sound is produced in the mouth and towards the back of the mouth, this is a back generative position, and it corresponds with the energies coming into manifestation in us in the pelvic floor at the root chakra. So as these energies come in, if we activate or focus the energy on the entry point of the earth ascending into us energies, we are affecting our vibratory field as it will unfold in our life around us. So that's why it's a common practice to use the Ganesha mantra for 40 days. 4 times 10, you're establishing some perfect manifestation or perfect statement on the earth. So it's like if you had a window and you decided to paint a beautiful stained glass picture on the window. And when the sun comes in the window every day, this image of this beautiful picture is cast into your room. That's what you're doing when you use the Ganesh mantra with intention, that you're filling your vibratory field as it arises with that intention. You've gone to the secret doorway of the manifesting energy by invoking the gum and the guna, Om Gum Ganapataye Namaha, and you're projecting that image of what you intend into your field. And whether or not you hit the lottery based on that or something else shifts, you've caused a shift. Your vibration has shifted. So that, quote, deity that you're interacting with is that vibrational force that's connected to the beginnings of manifestation. And it's just like when something takes a trajectory in software engineering, if you can catch a bug early in its inception in the requirement phase, the cost of fixing that is much smaller than if you're down into testing and now you have to fix the bug and it's costing you 40 times or whatever than if you caught it in requirements gathering. It's because what it has produces is so much harder to steer at that point. But when you catch it early in the inception, coming into manifestation, you're applying a great power that's equivalent to if you had to change it when it was something that was already manifested. So you're catching it at the beginning, and it's having an effect. So those are the, quote, the deities, and we're all becoming familiar about Brahma. This is the generative force. Vish is a great descending heavenly Vishnu. Vishnu, the U implies a carrying ability. Vishnu, it's a preserver, right? Same way with Shiva, the waveform comes out to shake up what's there. Vishnu changes to Shiva, and the Va, so Shh, and then the Va, we're creating something new with the Va. we've gone from we've gone through the cycle and we're starting a new cycle. We've taken the previous and we're so we're wiping the slate clean and creating a new manifestation that way. So you could generate through Ganesha, you could generate through Shiva, and this is part of the reason that in the stories that Ganesha is the son of Shiva. They both have this ability to change energy, to change manifestation. Shiva's called the destroyer only in the sense that it takes the previous energy and has the ability to move it to a different level. Okay, so that teaching is commonly known, I think, in people who are spiritually awake in Hinduism or go through yoga, etc. Eventually you learn about at least the deities. You may not necessarily learn about the sounds and how they work. But what hit me in preparing for this class in the last week or so was that the vahanas, there's no reason to have a vahana without a function to the vahana. Otherwise, there's no point to having it as part of the story. So, the names, just like the deities, the names of the vahanas themselves carry a supplemental energy to the primary deity. So, for instance, pretty much all of the major deities have a vahana, right? With Brahma, there's a cow, which is Nandi.
So the vahana is the animal?
Yeah, it's commonly looked at as an animal, yes.
It's their vehicle.
It's their vehicle, right? So what does that mean? So Ganesha's vehicle is a mouse, and Ganesha's vehicle is commonly referred to as the name for mouse, which sounds sort of like mouse. But the proper name, the not household name, but the formal name is Krancha. Krancha. And it's interesting that Kran in both Sanskrit and in Greek refers to time. So, and you could dissect Kran, the syllables of Kran. So, this is telling us that for the Ganesha mantra to really have an effect, we need to use Krancha, the mouse. We need to use it over time. This is the support. So, and it's not just, do it for 40 days, but there's something about the word Krancha. So, if we wanted to make up our own chant, then we would find a way to work Ganesha and Krancha. And we could say Ganesha, Krancha, Ganesha, Krancha. Okay, so once we get those principles down, then we can use the vehicle, Ganesha's vehicle, we can borrow it. Because it is a nice little mouse and it wants to help us. We can make up our own word, because we have the freedom to do that. And we can use Shanti, peace. And what we can do is we can take time and embody time with the concept of peace, and then seal it with a carrying syllable and with a manifestation, Kranshantiam. I haven't heard that used before. Kranshantiam. Oh no, it's Kranshantiam. What do we do? We need Kranshantiam. Okay. Okay.
So keeping in mind that Kranshantiam then relates to seeding time with peace. Stands up.
And time going forward and backward?
Time as that that trickster that makes us think that it's forward, backwards, and that it even exists, right? Right. So in our embodiment, in our existence, we experience time as we're a baby, we're a child, we're a teenager, we're a young adult, and we stay there. So we can use Kranshantiam to imbibe our whole journey, the journey of those around us, those that we relate to, the journey of putting Kranshantiam into the earth, planting the seeds of Kranshantiam into the earth so that it spreads out, it can spread out, it can manifest right now in Vietnam, in China, in Malaysia, in India, right now, because the earth is the place to place a seed, to place an intention, and watch it grow. So just to get yourself in your body, give yourself a little shake, get yourself in your feet, and then tap your third eye, get yourself into your inner vision, because your inner vision will allow you to direct this sound exactly where it's called for your journey, for your moment, for your experience. So then release that tapping, and we'll just go ahead and we'll do 11 Kranshantiam. Breathe in.
Kranshantiam. 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 Kranshantiam.
And
Kranshantiam.
the idea that your seeds of peace over time, now, past, present, infinitely, is there vibrating out beyond where we could ever know.
All right, the vahanas are appearing again in a few minutes on another slide. But for now, I sort of give it to you now so it sinks in, and then we'll talk about it a few more minutes. All right, so this week, Innocence, O. O. This is your first clue why it's childlike innocence. And then fifth element is carrying, U, for ether. So O, innocence, water element, it represents also or associated with the north, and is childlike innocence. And one interpretation of that Joseph gives is the ability to be filled with awe. So to see an experience as being awesome, just something that you can't describe, and it's the most wonderful thing that just made you feel alive and just like, wow, that's really interesting. And it relates to being open. So, and if you say "oh," does everybody say "oh"? Oh, it's the shape that your mouth makes. And it turns out that anytime a structure forms a spherical or circular shape, it's an invitation to be filled, And for a circle, it's an invitation for higher energies, higher dimensional energies to come in. A circle does have an energetic effect. It is an openness. And when we verbalize the circle through the sound O, we're causing ourselves to become a container or a receptacle for those energies. And those energies can come to us. And that's why the association is with childlike innocence. Because the childlike innocence, when a child interacts with life, they almost pull the experiences, the giggly, wondrous experiences out of the environment around them. And the environment responds to the cat doing the funny thing or whatever they're around because they have that openness to the experience. And when we approach ceremony or our life with that kind of openness to what is the response or what do you want to show me, right? We talked in the first 2 classes about if you go to a sacred site, you'd want to say, what would you like to tell me or what would you like to show me? When you create that openness or that innocence, then there's an automatic response because you've caused yourself to be the circle.
And what's also interesting too is if you say O into a tonoscope, which can transfer that vibration to a field of sand, it comes out in a circle. The sound, the sand forms a circle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly the same thing. You say O, your mouth is in a circle, the shape is a circle.
Mm-hmm. We are back. This O slide was just a review. Mouth shape, the attractiveness in terms of drawing, and innocence because it draws the divine qualities. When you create that open space, you're creating an attractor for the higher energies to come in. So I think this is the last O slide. O is forming a circular container around space, and that space is absolutely not an empty void. All space is the container for consciousness. In fact, I was reading something today that was talking about the shape of space through consciousness and the fact that certain temples are located where they are because there is this like foam-like lattice work that goes through space, and there are certain nodes that come together in these specific places. That's why Machu Picchu is where it's at. That's why the Egyptian pyramids are where they're at, etc. So what you're doing is you're inviting beingness into the container. So any open space, different forms of containers, different rectangular or other shapes have different functions. So the circular shape is like water is the most receptive to energy and consciousness in general. It's not putting, it's like a vowel sound in itself. Whereas you could think of a square or an octagonal shape is more like a consonant. The circle itself is more like the pure vowel shape. And it's associated with water because the water is going to go ahead and mold itself to whatever shape you put it in, whatever container you put it in. The O energy is going to invite whatever energies want to come into that. It's just a generally receptive state, just like water is. Water will conform to the container. When you draw the circle, the energy will come into the circle. And quite obviously with the shape of the O, when you're chanting an O sound, you are making a portal. So it's not just like you're making a baseball mitt or a cup to catch something. It's like where that energy is coming from, there is an open connection to it. That's why I said in my experience of chanting O, it felt like a vortex or a spinning, and there was talk about a vehicle, a vahana, etc. There's actually a connection that's established. It's not just I drew a circle and something landed in it. I draw a circle and that whole dynamic is in play. So when you're thinking about using the O sound, what you can think about is what do you want to bring into manifestation? Because you're creating this childlike innocence. And this takes us also to the vowels. And getting into the I-O-U, which is on the ah side and the ra side. That's using the fire more to drive the direction of the energy, to take it up the side of the pyramid. So it's I. So at the E, that's part of the reason I like to use this shape, is the E is sort of the height here. It's the awareness. It's where the inspiration comes to the top of the mountain. But now, coming back down to the O side, we begin to become receptive to what the response is for the intention that we drove up coming to one side. Coming up through the A-E. And now the response comes, the yin side comes, the O-U is coming. So we can, if we have a goal or a desire to manifest ourselves, we can do it a number of ways. We can drive the energy up with Ra, Ah, Eh, E, and we can also wait for the response in the O and the U. Okay, carrying the U sound. Okay, so again, these are the sound archetypes. The archetype of carrying. So this is ether, it's the center. So the primary, or one of the primary elements, if we were to measure them, that comes in very strongly would be ether coming through the circle. So this is the U sound, this is the superstructure, this is the outer framing to what all of the other elements, all of creation comes into. And in Platonic mystical geometry, the shape of the creation is thought to be a dodecahedron. So it's the ether superstructure for everything. It's the U sound, and it's easy to remember because the word womb, not coincidentally, is the U sound. Womb, U, womb. So whenever we have the U sound, we're carrying. Okay, it's the ability to hold the center, it's the sacred circle, the sacred space, the sacred consciousness. So, you know, when I look at this, the fetus would be in the womb, it's also a circular shape. So you can see that the I, O, U, the O and the U are very closely related. There's the O, the receptivity, the roundness. But then there's the U, which is like in this cycle, the final carrying place. It's if the marble is going back and forth in the bowl, the place where it finally ends up, and that resting position is the U sound. Oh, oh, it's the final place. Okay, so it's carrying. So it's the sound of the divine, the Who, and I'm going to read a quick from this book. This is Traveling the Sacred Sound Current. If you've never read this book, this is very much worth your time. It's a survey and a combination of some of the most meaningful quotes and writings that people have said about sound and sound mysticism that has all been put together in one place. So it's a great complement to Joseph's work. And in fact, the human, or the human, is the who, and the man, the who man, is the complement, or is the match to the divine. So when we say man is created, or people were created in God's image, there's that word human, or human, is an illustration of that. The Sufis consider Hu to be the most divine of all sounds. Inayat Khan explains in The Music of Life, the Supreme Being has been called by various names in different languages, but the mystics have known him as Hu. The natural name, not man-made, the only name of the nameless, which all nature constantly proclaims. The sound Hu is most sacred. The mystics called it the name of the Most High, for it is the origin and end of every sound, as well as the background of each word. The word hu is in the spirit of all sounds and of all words, and is hidden within them all as the spirit is in the body. It does not belong to any language, but no language can help belonging to it. This alone is the true name of God, a name that no people and no religion can claim as their own. This word is not only uttered by human beings, but is repeated by animals and birds. All things and beings proclaim this name of the Lord, for every activity of life expresses distinctly or indistinctly this very sound. This is the word mentioned in the Bible as existing before light came into being. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, beings, guru. A guru, the G sound is the divine sound. So, ru, so it's using the generative sound, and then the R sound, which is the sound of transformation. And the common translation is the teacher, but according to syllables, it's one translation is the one who turns from darkness to light. Guru. So we're embodying the G principle and then the R principle. Back to the Vamana, or Vahana, is Garuda. Garuda is the Vahana of Lakshmi and Vishnu. Garuda is a very interesting iconography here, especially when we compare it to Maruga. Garuda is known throughout Tibet and India as this very mighty winged sound in our understanding. It's a sound, it's a sonic archetype, and it is carrying the snake in its claws. Now, change that slightly, and Maruga is the son of Shiva, who rides, and this is his Vahana, a peacock, which is considered one of the highest revelations of the divine. The ultimate, his name is actually Paravani. So here's another phrase to use, Maruga and Paravani, or Paravani, Paravanam, Paravanti, you can change it up. Paravani is the ultimate voice of God, and it's something that is beyond sound. So very interesting. Garuda, Maruga, they're both birds, and they both carry a snake. Now, the clue about the snake is actually also in the Andean culture, where the three levels of creation, the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. The upper world is the realm of the condor, and is the realm that would be equated to heaven. The middle world is the realm of the panther or the cougar, and the lower world, or the lower nature, is like the underworld. It's not exactly like hell, but it's the lower nature. It's associated to the snake. So the snake is the reactive, unrefined human ego, the human condition. So there's a mantra or words in here. These sonic archetypes are able to transform and get a grip on the ego and change your consciousness into a being that's able to take flight, that's able to fly above the normal circumstances of the world. It's very similar. Two U's and a A, M and a G, an R smack in the middle. Okay, so I encourage you to work with them. And we're going to stop here with this chant. Mata Chihu. And let's chant this 4 times together. Mata Chihu came to me actually 2 weeks ago. Ta Chihu is very powerful, and this chant just of Mata Chihu, it's a way to add or augment the vibration of who we are on the earth and the earth itself with mata. So we're going in and we're getting under that, or we're coming into it like we're plowing the seed, like in ta chihu. So we're taking the state of the earth or the state of ourselves, mata, and we're opening something, and we're bringing to it chi, which is movement. So we're taking whatever the current state of the world, our world, us in the world, mata chi, and we're adding movement to it, and we're adding the ability to carry the divine. So we're stirring up the planet, stirring up our own lives to open the ground so that we can carry the divine. On class 4, we left off at the slide for Mata Chihu, and I'm going to back up just one slide back to you beings for the Garuda and the Maruga. And I just want to emphasize again that these are very special vahanas, the vehicles of the deity sounds, and that for instance, the Garuda chant could be used with both a Vishnu chant and a Lakshmi chant. And also Maruga could be used with a Shiva chant, and Paravani could be used also in the same chant. So you've got this extension of energy from Shiva through Maruga through Paravani. So you could do a Shiva Paravani chant, a Maruga Paravani chant, and so on, to combine them in different ways. Alright, so back to the Mata Chihu, and we practice this a little bit in class, and I would encourage you to experiment with focusing on the syllables and then to look at what comes up for you in terms of cadence and rhythm, and then how does the practice unfold in terms of making your own chant or your own song that uses the syllables here. And even to modify from that point, you could go to Mata Chi Hum, Mata Chi Hung. So this again is our bent pyramid, and as a living cycle that the vowels join together and they string together. And I mentioned that I had heard within the last few days that this is actually a great blessing of the Maori people, is to sing a chant which strings these vowel sounds together. I don't know the exact song that they use, but if we sing those together, and again you can follow inspiration for I-O. So we start out with the ah, we start out with new, refining, and I always think ah sound as being a tent that's being established. It's a dwelling that's being erected, and it's a container for future development. So the ah, eh, and at the eh on this slide, we see that there's a change in the angle. So there's a change from ah to eh on the power or the purpose of the syllable. So ah is our base, and then is forming the relationship or the connection between the base and then the peak being e, where all the inspiration is. And so we've formed an intention, we've moved the energy forward through I, and at this point the E becomes like a connecting platform or a connecting tower, and we become receptive to that inspiration that's there, that awareness and insight at E, and now we bring back down, we become receptive, and we go through the O. So we go I, O, and at that O, we're beginning to open to what the response is. We scale the tower through I, and then we come back down O, I, O. And you can play with the sounds, the tones that you're using. But you can see here that there is a progression, and you can begin to see that an arrangement like this of the vowel sounds do support this concept of moving an intention and then receiving a response. Now, we've looked at Sri Shiva before. During one of the first classes, I mentioned his recording Chant to Control the 9 Planets, which I feel is very powerful, very transformative. Now, he has another chant where he talks about manifesting, and he uses this chant, Arakara. So, just by looking at Arakara, we can see the A-A elements in the front. We know that there are different shapes that our mouth produces. So what we would want to do is, in chanting Arakara, we'd want to experiment with and see what is the shape, what is the sensation. And in this case, the Ara, the Ra sound, there's an action or a quality behind Ra. There's a similar quality behind the Ka. And we know about chakra and chakana. So this is another phrase that's very similar, Arakara. So we want you to play with that. On the next slide, the Arakara practice. So how you would use this is you want to put an arrow in your bow. That's your intention. The arrow, and especially the arrowhead, in Native American viewpoints, is the power to accomplish your goals. It's the power to move forward. It's the ability to attract and possess a goal. So it's the ability to move forward in life. So even think about that word, arrow. Arrow and Arakara. There's a lot of the same principles that is going on here. Ara. Moving forward with a being that uses fire or the power of transformation. Alright, so what we would do is we would take an intention and we would visualize or state this goal, and we would want to cultivate the imagery and or the feeling that is present when you can imagine that this goal would be accomplished. So let's say the goal is for world peace or an enlightened civilization on the planet or some similar goal. We would hold on to that feeling, and then we would go ahead and chant Arakara. And we might want to chant it a certain number of times, and we might want to continue the practice a certain number of days. So again, we would be able to start using just more of a standard chanting practice where we might go Arakara, 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 Arakara. I talked about this a little bit in class today, that when we're talking about invoking these sounds, we're talking about invoking these sonic archetypes. And in another part of the class, I talked about how this connection that we're making when we're doing the chanting is to an aspect of our higher selves. So in a similar way in the class, when we talked about that we're composed of these elements, so that water expresses a certain ability of being, the ability to be receptive, to be innocent in a childlike way, and then also for the oo sound, the ability to carry, the ability to respond to and receive an insight and to really hold on to it, to carry it. So too, these sonic archetypes that we are tuning into are just aspects of our higher self. So when we are doing a Shiva chant or a Ganesh chant or whatever chant, not only are we not calling to a God, a separate individual being who is something separate from us, but when we invoke this energy through sound, we're actually manifesting an aspect of our own beingness in this dimension. So, according to that perspective or that viewpoint, the hope of the planet for transformation is not in achieving a certain type of technology. It's not in a certain kind of brotherhood or galactic whoever spaceships coming to help us out. It's actually a viewpoint where we are bootstrapping, to use a computer term, we are self-igniting a realm or a set of qualities of realization of being that come through us. So that we see then these bodies are the vehicles for this greater beingness to come through. And you could look at this from two viewpoints. One is to anchor the energy here, and the other is to raise our bodies and our planets up to a higher level. So, in terms of chanting and the chanting work, I think you'll find it more powerful if you realize that these urgings for peace or enlightenment or healing or whatever are the desire for us as the higher existing beings to come to this realm and to have an effect. So it's not like asking for help from another personality. It's connecting to the core of beingness that we already are. And when we do that, there's an effect in the world. So, anytime you focus your intention somewhere, when you chant, it will have a little more impact. We talked about adding qualities or finer and finer details to the chanting. There's the vowel, the consonant. There's then what you carry in your thoughts and in your mind. There's the tune when you cross over into sing chanting. And even with sing chanting, there's the vibration or the octave or the attenuations, the small adjustments you make to the quality of the voice. As you do these, they convey additional information and bring additional beingness, qualities of being to this dimension. All right, getting into next to last section, science of shape is the science of sound. So the point here is that as societies develop their knowledge of vibration and of energy, they bootstrap the development of the consciousness of their members through design architecture and tools which promote energy flow. So by this what I mean as a civilization, or as rather a culture, makes the transformation or the transition to a civilization. A culture can be anything. A culture can be a group of individuals who live a certain way. But a civilization is a culture which is conscious of vibration and conscious of energy and conscious of the ability to affect consciousness. And one of the key aspects or characteristics of a civilization is not only not the fear of altering consciousness through sound and other means, but the pursuit of altering consciousness by sound and by other means. So what ends up happening is, as different members of the society, now civilization, come together, they begin to be shown, according to inner vision, how to design buildings in a way that support consciousness, how to combine buildings and plants, vegetation, in order to design places where there's good flow of negative ions and other things that support the upliftment of consciousness. And what ends up happening is, as more people understand this, they begin to make more buildings. So it's almost like over time, the buildings become finer and they're dealing with more subtle energies. So that as children grow up in these environments, they can experience as children not only a sustained connection to the innocence and the fascination with life that all children come into the world with, but they're able to come through a maturation of consciousness in a much accelerated rate than, say, children who grow up in this society, in this culture. So that if you get down through this kind of a culture, say through 10,000 years, where the architecture and the ceremonies and the way people are taught becomes more oriented around sound, then the human being is qualitatively different coming out of that culture, that civilization, than people who just grew up with basic stuff, say, like we have today. So this is the point. As people become more aware of shape and of the effects that shape has in moving energy, like the pagoda and different pyramidal structures, then the society itself transforms itself into a civilization. And it all starts with an awareness of vibration, energy, and sound, how to use sound. On the next slide, a vibratory culture is civilization. So there are many, many, many indications. Starting from the left image here, those little things are whistling vessels, which are predominant in South America from the Chimu and other cultures. It's very clear that there was a widespread use of these little whistling vessels, a little whistle shaped in the form of an animal or a god. And when you take these whistles, these whistling vessels, and you blow a few of them together, the most common experience is a mind-altering, consciousness-altering experience. So this is similar to the tingshas, the Tibetan tingshas, where one is slightly off note in the frequency than the other. It produces this spatial harmonic similar to the Monroe Institute hemisync type of experience, where you're actually inducing different brain waves. Similar effect is happening with these whistling vessels. In the left center picture, this is an aerial image of a region in Peru called More, and More has these concentric circles. And the archaeologists or people around there will say, well, this is just an example of their terracing, growing different crops. I would say, no way. This is clearly a container for stepping celestial or very high energies down different levels. It's almost like a radio antenna turned sideways, or a satellite receiver, satellite dish. And no doubt people went into these circles to do different ceremonies and were very likely to be toning and interacting with sound while they were in this experience. Right center, this is what's commonly called a papyri scepter. Archaeologists will tell you these were just, little pointers to use when people were reading papyri. No way. These are energy pendulums, energy devices that were activated through intent and probably also through sound. And then in right center, it's a very, very interesting picture, hieroglyphics. And the center column that's turned slightly on a diagonal is a Jed, D-J-E-D, which many people in metaphysics communities believe is symbolic of the human chakra system. And raising the pillar, or raising the Jed, D-J-E-D, is raising the consciousness. So all of the hieroglyphics of the earlier dynasties have to do with energies and metaphors and these sonic archetypes. They're all encoded visually, and I do not believe that we have decoded them according to their original meanings. I believe through the Rosetta Stone, we were given an association or a translation which was much later than the original understanding. So I think it's a corrupted understanding that's in the hieroglyphs translations. I think we're still waiting for somebody to come along who can decode them according to their original sound meanings. All right, last set of slides on civilization. So again, what is a civilization? It's a society who's aware of vibration, energy, consciousness, harmony, the soul, and the interrelatedness of all things. It's a society devoted to the development and enhancement of those areas. And how can you tell that you have a civilization? Well, basically everything. The objects, the culture, from the, quote, proprioceptors, the pendulums, to the structures built in stone, the concentric circles at Moray in Peru, Machu Picchu, all of those things have the ability to interact with vibration and energy as the primary purpose that they have in mind. And that these energies are channeled and facilitated or moved in a way, I don't want to say controlled, but I want to say harmonically they're moved in a way that affects the human energy field and thereby affects consciousness. So it's very likely that many of the hieroglyphics had specific functions as machines, so that when the right songs were chanted in front of them, that information was symbolically transmitted to the initiate. Oftentimes, temples and caves were primary locations for working with sound, and specific sites had specific purposes in that they were tuned more to a certain energy, say more tuned to working with the throat chakra or the root chakra, etc. And their actual tuning or what their forte or their strength was could vary slightly based on the conditions of the year. For instance, you could go into a cave at night and it could manifest different qualities than, say, perhaps at the winter solstice when the sunlight may be coming in directly into the mouth of the cave or the back of the cave at dawn. All right, slide here on Machu Picchu. So there's three things here. On the left, this is an open roofed, there's no roof, room, and there are these little portices that you put your head into, and if you chant or tone on one side, then 20, 30 feet away on the other side with your head in the matching ones on the different end of this room, you can hear the sound coming out. So there are sound conduits that are built in behind these walls that are connecting back and forth. And you see this over and over again in Peru and in civilizations. You see this understanding of sound. And you can demonstrate by going to these places that they're acoustically active and that they're doing different things to channel or move energy and move the sound. So that's that room in the upper left picture. In the center picture is an energy key, and this energy key was the key for me going to the biogeometry classes to then understand why Machu Picchu is laid out the way it is. Basically, starting from the bottom, any energy flow as it encounters an object will produce two vortices, two spins. There's a right hand on the right side of the object, a right hand clockwise spin, and a left hand counterclockwise spin. Now, what happens, and usually in ceremony when we go clockwise, is this is part of the reason that is not communicated to folks, is part of the reason we go clockwise is because we're doing something that supports life, that supports a current configuration. Whereas something that is counterclockwise is sort of an unwinding of the life vibration or the current situation. So counterclockwise unwinds, clockwise winds and affirms. And one of the first things that you notice, now switching to the right diagram, at Machu Picchu, so this would be at the bottom is south, going those spokes that go into the center of the diagram are the Intihuatana at Machu Picchu, which is commonly referred to as the hitching post of the sun. So the line that goes straight from the bottom straight to the top is going from Machu Picchu mountain, it goes through the Intihuatana, and goes up to Huayna Picchu, which is a mountain that you can climb. It's a pretty strenuous climb. So the right hand spin from Machu Picchu through the Intihuatana to Huayna Picchu, all of the structures in Machu Picchu site all occur east of the Intihuatana. On the west side of the Intihuatana are just terraces. There are few, if any, structures that are there. Further, when I saw the energy key and how these colors map out to the energy key from the center diagram, I really felt, this was in 2005 December, I really felt that principle applied to Machu Picchu. Just from having remembered the site and how it was laid out, I just intuitively had a strong, I have to go back. So Gauri and I went back in 2006. We took a virtual cone pendulum. We went to these 12 bands and we measured for the presence of the energy in each of the bands, and we got a hit for that energy in each location. So Machu Picchu is a spiritual engine. It's an energetic engine, and the initiates, the folks there who were trained at this site, worked on the different energy levels there. So what the diagram helps to explain is not only the prevalent energy that's in each of the regions, but it also is an interpretive aid to explain each of the structures, each of the buildings, each of the rooms that are present within each band. For instance, at the throat chakra is an interesting place called the Temple of the Condor. Now, that is in the blue throat band. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you go to this little cave that's inside the stone structure at the Temple of the Condor, there's a small cave that you can crawl into, and one of the folks who was there in 2005, who went in there with me, had the strong sense that this was a place where the shamans or the medicine people there in Peru would go to communicate with other shamans on other parts of the planet. And I would also add other places in general, not on the planet. That would be my addition to that. So if you are an initiate, a student there at Machu Picchu, part of your exercises would likely be to go into the Temple of the Condor and practice your communication skills, practice singing and chanting there, developing your throat chakra and the abilities that are associated with that. And this was true of every of the 12 bands. For instance, in the black and the infrared bands, which are the first two bands on the upper right picture, the lack of practically any structures in the black band, and then few structures in the infrared band, and then increasing more structures. And then you have the same type of decrease of the density of structures, say, by the time you get to the negative green band on the bottom. So practically you have an energy key to interpret the whole site at Machu Picchu. And for me, this is clearly the evidence of planning of a site by a civilization. This was not the emperor's palace, the emperor's summer retreat, whatever the archaeologists want to say. They have vested interest to maintaining a certain set of stories about our history in general. And what really happened at Machu Picchu, they really don't have a clue. But by looking at this, we can begin to see evidence of a civilization which understood vibration and how vibration and energy applies to the human being. All right, and then the homework for week 4, we have O and U every day. I encourage you to practice the improv chanting, to introduce the singing to it, and to change up the prefixes or suffixes behind the roots and the different energies on that. And then if you haven't already watched or listened to the 4th video of the YouTube series that's out there, go ahead and please do that. And then It Being Vibration, that book, I would think now as you've been reading through the book, that more and more as you're reading, more things are going to speak to you because we've been doing this work. And there's a deeper activation that comes behind listening, reading his words. Joseph speaking. All right, that's it. Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Bye.